Before we start, if you enjoy the story, please leave a like and check if you're subscribed. The arena floor stank of blood and fear. Cade Brennan's knees hit cracked stone as armored hands shoved him forward, chains biting into his wrists. The roar that greeted him wasn't sound. It was pressure that squeezed his chest and rang his ears. Thousands of Scarnathi packed the tiered seats above, their crimson bodies creating a forest of horns and tails against harsh overhead lights. 3 other humans stumbled beside him. He didn't know their names. Cade forced himself upright despite weeks in a cell. His legs shook but held. Around the arena's perimeter, gates promised something designed to kill entertainingly. Movement at the arena's edge drew his attention. A figure descended the stands, leaping from tier to tier with impossible grace. 20 feet of crimson and black, curves and muscle wrapped in armor that left arms and legs free. Massive curved horns framed a face too beautiful to belong to something built for violence. Queen Zathera landed hard enough to crack stone, her tail lashing for balance. Blue-green eyes swept over the prisoners with casual disinterest. Cade met that gaze and didn't look away. Her head tilted, she smiled, revealing fangs. "The one who killed 17 of my soldiers. I wanted to see if reports were exaggerated." Cade said nothing. Zathera gestured. Gates opened. What emerged had too many legs and armor plating that gleamed like oil over muscle. The other prisoners screamed. Cade watched its movement pattern, counted limbs, tracked its head rotation. The slaughter was efficient. 3 humans died in under a minute, torn apart by limbs faster than anything that size should move. Cade had used that minute to reach a support pillar where chains hung from previous entertainment. He wrapped a length around his forearm as the creature turned, its eyes reflecting light. It charged. Cade dropped and rolled at the last second. The creature's momentum carried it past, claws scoring stone. He came up running, using the pillar as cover. The crowd's roar changed pitch. Zathera watched from the center, arms crossed. The creature adapted. Its next charge was a feint, limbs spreading to cut off escape. Cade grabbed broken stone and threw it at the overhead lights. Glass rained down. The creature flinched, and Cade lunged forward, wrapping chains around one rear leg. He pulled hard. The creature's leg buckled, stumbled, and Cade moved again, staying under its primary attack angle. 2 minutes passed, then 3. The creature bled now from forced overextensions into stone and metal. Cade bled too, chest heaving, arms screaming. 4 minutes. The creature lunged. Cade's leg gave out. He hit the ground, rolled, felt claws tear his uniform and score his back. Enough. Zathera's voice cut through chaos. The creature froze, then retreated. Cade pushed himself to his feet, refusing to meet what came next on the ground. Zathera walked toward him. Up close, she was massive, her shoulder at his head height. Heat radiated from her scaled skin, and he smelled copper and cinnamon, sharp and foreign. "You survived longer than expected against an opponent designed to kill humans efficiently." Cade spat blood, disappointed. Her smile showed more teeth. "Curious, you're prey, too slow, too weak, too fragile, yet you don't fight like prey. Maybe your definition needs updating." The crowd quieted. Zathera studied him with those blue-green eyes, and Cade saw intelligence beyond brutality. "I'll grant you a choice. Face me for 5 minutes. Don't die, don't beg for mercy, and you go free. Refuse and die cleanly now." Cade laughed despite the pain. "That's not a choice. That's creative execution." "Perhaps, but it's more than my soldiers gave you. Answer." He thought about Chen, still alive somewhere, about the 17 Scarnathi he'd killed before capture, about colonies burned and people enslaved, about the certainty he couldn't survive 5 minutes against something that could crush his skull with one hand. 5 minutes, Cade said. "Start counting." Zathera stepped back, stance loose. "When you're ready." Cade didn't wait. He moved low and fast, chains wrapped around one arm. Zathera's hand snapped out, but he'd changed direction, rolling under her reach. Her tail lashed toward him, and he barely got his arms up to take the impact on chains instead of his head. The force still sent him stumbling. She was testing him. He could see it in how she pulled strikes that could have ended him. Fine. He'd show her what humans did when tested. Cade used everything, pillars, chains, broken stone, forcing Zathera to chase him. She was faster, stronger, but bigger, and every massive movement required more energy. He made her waste both. 2 minutes, his vision blurred, lungs burning. Zathera caught him. Her hand closed around his torso, lifting him easily, claws pressed against his ribs just short of puncturing. But over. Cade wrapped chains around her wrist and swung his legs up, using momentum to throw her off balance. She wasn't expecting it. Her heel caught broken stone. She stumbled, grip loosening. He twisted free, dropped, and when she lunged again, he went inside her reach instead of away. Too close for her to use size advantage. Close enough to feel her skin's heat and the thunderous beating of her heart. His hands found the seam where armor joined at her shoulder. Not to damage, he couldn't, but to demonstrate he could reach vital points. Zathera froze. Her eyes locked on his, so close he could see deeper color in that alien blue-green. Her breath ghosted across his face, hot and sharp. 4 minutes, maybe more. She moved. Suddenly Cade was airborne, hitting the ground hard enough to crack stone. Zathera loomed above, one hand planted beside his head, her body caging him. Her other hand pressed against his chest, claws dimpling skin without breaking it. She was breathing hard, actually breathing hard. The arena had gone silent. "You made me work for it," Zathera said softly, something in her expression he couldn't name. "No one makes me work for it." Cade met her eyes, pinned and broken and certain he was about to die. "Then maybe you've been fighting the wrong opponents." Her laugh was unexpected, genuine, rumbling through her chest into his. She stood, releasing him, and addressed the crowd. "This human lives. He'll train my elite guard in his tactics. Anyone who harms him answers to me personally." The crowd's confusion was palpable. Zathera turned back as guards moved forward with fresh chains. "Get him to the palace. Medical attention, then quarters. I'll speak with him tonight." As they dragged him away, Cade looked back once. Zathera stood in the arena's center, hand pressed against the shoulder where he'd demonstrated his reach. She met his eyes across the distance, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with captor and prisoner. Something that felt far more dangerous than anything in the arena. Hours later, medical attention received and chains replaced with lighter restraints, Cade sat in quarters far better than his cell. The door opened without warning. Zathera had to duck to enter, her horns scraping the frame. She stood there, studying him in the low light, no guards, no witnesses. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Fight? Didn't have much choice." "No." She moved closer and the room suddenly felt smaller. "Why did you go for my armor seam instead of trying to hurt me?" Cade met her gaze. "Because hurting you was impossible. But showing you I could reach you, that you're not untouchable, that was possible." Zathera was silent for a long moment. Then she laughed, low and genuine. "In 1,000 arena battles, no opponent has ever made me fight seriously. Most die in seconds. The strong ones last minutes, but never threaten me." She crouched, bringing her face level with his, close enough that he could feel her breath. "You made my heart race. You made me sweat. You made me feel something I haven't felt in decades." "What's that?" "Challenged." Her claws traced the air near his face, not quite touching. "Tomorrow, training begins. You'll teach my warriors how a prey species survives against predators. But tonight, I wanted to understand something." "Understand what?" "How something so small and fragile refused to break when everything about you should have shattered." Her voice dropped lower. "What makes humans fight when they should surrender?" Cade held her gaze. "Same thing that makes you keep fighting even when you're already on top. We're not that different. We just express it differently." Zathera's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across features designed for intimidation. She stood abruptly, moving toward the door. "Get rest. Tomorrow will be difficult." "Your Majesty," Cade called. She paused without turning. "Why did you really spare me?" She looked back over her shoulder, and in her eyes was something raw and honest. "Because in all my victories, I've never faced an opponent who made me work for it, and I wanted to understand how." She left, the door closing behind her with finality. Cade sat in the silence, touching the cuts across his ribs where her claws had dimpled skin without breaking it. Control, not mercy. Precision, not restraint. He'd shown her he could reach her weak points. She'd shown him she could have killed him 100 times and chose not to. Outside, the palace hummed with night activity, and somewhere in the darkness a 20-foot queen stood on her balcony, hands still pressed against the armor seam a human had touched, wondering why that moment had felt more dangerous than any battle she'd ever fought. Training began at dawn. Cade stood in a courtyard surrounded by 15 Scarnathi warriors, each one towering over him, each one looking at him like he was an insult to their profession. Zathera observed from a raised platform, her presence ensuring no one tried anything lethal. "Your size is your disadvantage," Cade said, addressing the group. "You rely on strength because you've always had it. Against opponents smaller and faster, that becomes your weakness." The largest warrior, 18 feet of muscle and scarred crimson skin, laughed. "Show us, pray." Cade gestured him forward. The warrior came confidently, casually, and Cade waited until he was close enough. Then he moved, dropping low and sweeping the warrior's forward leg while simultaneously pushing against his hip. Physics and momentum did the rest. The warrior crashed down hard enough to shake the courtyard. The laughter stopped. "Strength without adaptation is brittle," Cade said. "Your opponent doesn't need to be stronger, they need to be smarter." From her platform, Zathera leaned forward, attention focused. The sessions continued daily. Cade taught them to use environment as weapon, to recognize patterns in opponent movement, to turn aggression into exploitable momentum. The warriors learned grudgingly, then with genuine interest as they began winning practice bouts against each other, using techniques that had nothing to do with raw power. Zathera attended every session, officially to supervise, actually because she couldn't stay away. On the 5th day, she descended from the platform mid-session. "Demonstrate on me," she ordered. The courtyard went silent. Cade met her gaze, seeing the challenge there. "Your Majesty, I'm not sure. Are you afraid?" Her smile was all teeth. Cade stepped forward, just trying to avoid getting killed for touching royalty. "I'll allow it, this once." He showed her a basic joint lock, explaining the mechanics while his hands guided her arm into position. Her skin was warm under his touch, scales smooth and foreign. She was stronger than any human could be, but the principle still applied. Leverage beat strength when applied correctly. "You're not committing," Cade said. "You're letting me move you." "Because you're showing me the technique." "No, because you don't believe something my size can actually control your movement." He adjusted his grip. "Resist. Properly." Zathera did. Her arm tensed, muscle becoming stone. Cade shifted his position, found the angle where her strength worked against her, and applied pressure. Not much, he couldn't overpower her, but enough to demonstrate the point. Her body moved, despite her resistance, following the path of least pain. Her eyes widened slightly. "It's not about overpowering you," Cade said quietly, aware of how close they were. "It's about making your own strength trap you." Zathera studied him, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with combat instruction. Heat that wasn't from the sun overhead. "Again," she said, "teach me properly." They worked through the afternoon, Zathera learning with the focus she brought to everything. The warriors watched their queen allowing a human to position her body, to demonstrate holds and breaks, and understood that something had shifted in the palace hierarchy. That evening, Liaison Thera found Cade in his quarters. "You're playing a dangerous game," she said. The smaller Scarnathi settled onto a bench, her bright red skin vivid in the lamplight. "General Vexmore is spreading rumors. He says the queen has grown weak, distracted by human novelty." "I'm just doing what she ordered." "You're doing more than that, and everyone can see it." Thera's expression was serious. "She watches you like you're a puzzle she needs to solve, and you watch her back." Cade said nothing. Vexmore represents the old ways, conquest, domination, species hierarchy. He sees her interest in your tactics, in you as corruption. He's building support for a challenge. "A challenge?" "Ritual combat, for the throne," Thera stood. "Be careful. If she falls, you die, slowly." After Thera left, Cade stared at the ceiling, thinking about Cythera's hand on his shoulder that morning, the way she'd smiled when he'd successfully demonstrated a reversal, the way his chest tightened when she entered a room. This was getting complicated. 2 days later, everything changed. A border outpost went silent. Cythera assembled a response force and, to everyone's shock, ordered Cade to accompany them. "You'll observe real combat," she announced. "See how your tactics apply under actual conditions." They traveled in armored transports, Cythera beside Cade, her warriors filling the remaining space. The tension was different now, not practice but preparation. These warriors had accepted him mostly. They valued results over prejudice. The outpost was burning when they arrived. Bodies lay scattered, both Scarnathi and something else, bipedal, six-limbed, covered in chitinous armor. The Vreth, Cythera called them. Opportunistic raiders who tested borders looking for weakness. "They're still here," Cythera said, reading the scene. "Looting the interior." Cade studied the compound layout. "If they're inside, they're trapped. 3 entry points, all choke points. They'll expect you to charge in." "What would you do?" "Make them come out, fire, smoke, cut off retreat, then engage in the open where you have mobility advantage." Cythera smiled. "Implement it." What followed wasn't the glorious battle Scarnathi culture celebrated. It was efficient, brutal, and completely one-sided. Cade directed warrior placement while Cythera coordinated the assault. When the Vreth fled the burning compound, they ran into prepared positions. When they tried to scatter, they found escape routes blocked. Cade fought beside warriors who could have crushed him, using speed and position to target vulnerable points while they provided overwhelming force. And Cythera was everywhere, a crimson whirlwind of claws and tail, but fighting smarter now, using the tactics he'd taught instead of relying solely on strength. When the last Vreth fell, Cythera stood among the dead, breathing hard, covered in blood that wasn't hers. She looked at Cade, and he saw recognition there, understanding. They'd won, together, not through strength alone, but through adaptation. That night, camped in the ruins, Cythera found Cade standing watch. Her approach was silent despite her size. "You've changed how my warriors fight," she said. "I've just shown them options they already had." "No." She moved closer, her presence overwhelming in the darkness. "You've challenged everything we believe about power, about strength." Her voice dropped lower. "About ourselves." Cade turned to face her. In the firelight, her scales seemed to glow, her horns casting long shadows. She was terrifying and beautiful and entirely too close. "The elite guard requests their chains be removed," Cythera continued. "They say you're not a slave, but an advisor, that you've earned freedom of movement." "What do you say?" "I say they're right." She reached out, and her claw traced the air near his face without touching. "Tomorrow we return to the palace. Your status changes. No more chains, no more quarters under guard. You'll be my strategic advisor officially." "That'll make Vexmore happy." "Vexmore can challenge me if he dares," her eyes locked on his. "But there's something else, something I don't understand." "What?" "Why I care whether you live or die. Why watching you fight beside my warriors makes my heart race. Why your opinion matters when no one's opinion has mattered in decades." She moved closer still, and Cade could feel her breath, hot against his skin. "What have you done to me?" Cade held her gaze, aware of the danger and the impossibility and the absolute certainty that everything had changed between them. "Maybe the same thing you've done to me," he said quietly. "Made me see past what I expected to see." Cythera's hand moved to his shoulder, her touch careful despite the claws. The weight of it was substantial but not crushing. Control, not restraint. "In my culture, showing vulnerability is death. Caring about someone is weakness an enemy can exploit." Her thumb brushed against his collarbone. "But you said something in the arena, that maybe strength isn't about not caring." "It's about being brave enough to care despite the risk." "Then I'm either very brave or very foolish." She stepped back, and the loss of her presence felt like cold. "Sleep. Tomorrow changes everything." She left him there, and Cade touched where her hand had rested, feeling the warmth lingering on his skin. Behind them, the compound burned. Ahead, the palace waited with its politics and dangers. Between them, something grew that had no name in either of their languages. something that felt inevitable and impossible, and entirely too dangerous to survive. But they'd both survived impossible odds before. Maybe they could survive this too. The palace was in chaos when they returned. General Vexmore stood in the throne room surrounded by loyalists, and his voice carried through the halls like thunder. I invoke the right of ascension combat. Zathera entered without hesitation, Cade beside her. The assembled court parted, creating a corridor to where Vexmore waited. 22 feet of scarred muscle and broken horns, he represented everything old and brutal about Scarnathi culture. On what grounds? Zathera's voice was cold. Corruption, weakness. You elevate prey species to positions of honor, you adopt their tactics, their thinking, you make us soft. Vexmore's gaze slid to Cade with open contempt. You shame yourself with this creature. Murmurs rippled through the court. Zathera's tail lashed once, controlled violence. When? 3 days, the traditional arena, the traditional rules. Vexmore smiled, showing fangs. And when I claim the throne, my first act will be executing every human in Scarnathi territory, starting with your pet advisor. Zathera moved so fast Cade barely tracked it. She was across the room, claws at Vexmore's throat, her body coiled for the kill. But she stopped, controlled herself, stepped back. 3 days, she said. Bring your best. That night, Liaison Thera brought news that made everything worse. Human ships entered the system. Small force, stealth approach. They're inserting a team planetside. She looked at Cade. They're coming for her. How do you know? Because we intercepted their communications. They think the succession combat creates opportunity. Kill Zathera during the chaos, destabilize the Empire. Thera's expression was grim. They identified you as leverage, either rescue or liability, depending on your status. Cade's mind raced. A human strike team meant military, meant people he'd trained with maybe fought beside, people who thought they were saving humanity by killing the Scarnathi queen. People who didn't know what he knew now. I need to see Chen, Cade said. Is he still alive? In the lower cells, I can arrange it. Captain Jorah Chen looked older than Cade remembered. Weeks of captivity had carved lines in his face, but his eyes were still sharp, still calculating. Cade! Chen stood as guards opened the cell. You're alive and walking around without chains. It's complicated. I bet it is. Chen studied him. What happened to you? I survived, adapted, started teaching them tactics. Cade sat across from his former commander. Chen, there's a human team coming. Assassination mission targeting Queen Zathera. Good. No, not good. If they kill her, Vexmore takes power, and his first act is executing every human prisoner, including you. Chen was quiet for a moment. So we're leverage either way. Dead if she dies, dead if she wins and decides we're too much trouble. Or alive if she wins and I convince her to start actual negotiations. Cade leaned forward. She's not what we thought. None of them are. They're brutal, yes, but not mindless. They value strength, but they're capable of change. You're defending them. Chen's voice was flat. The species that burned colonies, that enslaved thousands. I'm defending the chance to end the war instead of perpetuating it. Cade met his friend's eyes. Help me. When the strike team comes, help me stop them. You're asking me to betray humanity. I'm asking you to save it. This assassination fails either way. They're walking into a trap they don't know exists. But if we intervene, if we stop them before they trigger a massacre, maybe we create space for something different. Chen studied him for a long time. You care about her, the queen. Cade didn't deny it. Yeah, I do. That's insane. Probably, Cade stood. But it's also true, and right now truth is all I've got. The day of the ritual combat arrived. The arena filled with thousands of Scarnathi, all waiting to see if their queen would maintain her throne or fall to the general who promised a return to the old ways. Zathera stood in the center, armor minimal per tradition, her body a testament to decades of undefeated combat. Cade watched from the raised platform reserved for the queen's inner circle. Thera stood beside him, tense. She'll win, Cade said, trying to convince himself. Vexmore has been planning this for months. He knows her style, her patterns. Thera's voice was tight. And she's distracted, because of you. Guilt twisted in Cade's chest. But before he could respond, Movement in the crowd caught his attention. Figures moving wrong, wearing civilian clothing, but moving with military precision. The strike team. Thera, I need to move now. What? Trust me. He pushed through the crowd, tracking the figures as they converged on positions overlooking the arena floor. Professional spacing, overlapping fields of fire. They weren't just here to kill Zathera. They were here to do it during the combat, when she'd be most vulnerable and least protected. Below, the ritual began. Vexmore and Zathera circled each other, and the first clash was thunder. Claws met claws, tails whipped with lethal force. They were matched in brutality, but Zathera fought smarter, using techniques she'd learned, conserving energy, while Vexmore expended his in shows of dominance. Cade reached the first sniper position, a woman in her 30s, rifle aimed at the arena floor. Commander Sarah Voss, according to mission briefings he'd memorized years ago. Don't, Cade said. She spun, weapon tracking to him, then froze. Brennan? They said you were here. Stand down, Commander. Step aside, that's an order. I'm not under your command anymore. Cade moved between her and her sight line. This assassination triggers a purge. Every human prisoner dies. Captain Chen dies. Acceptable losses for removing their queen. It doesn't remove her. It replaces her with someone worse, and it guarantees this war continues for another generation. Cade's voice was urgent. There's another way. Negotiations, real ones. With monsters? With people who are capable of change if we give them reason to change. Below, Zathera and Vexmore crashed together again. Blood painted the arena floor, and Cade couldn't tell whose. Voss's finger tightened on the trigger. Cade grabbed for the rifle. They struggled, and the weapon discharged. The shot going wide, but alerting everyone to the threat. Skarnathi warriors converged on their position. In the arena, Vexmore saw the chaos and made his move. He lunged for Zathera's exposed back, claws extended for a killing strike. Cade broke free from Voss and ran. He couldn't reach the arena floor in time, couldn't stop what was happening, but Chen appeared from the crowd, freed somehow, and threw a piece of broken stone. It struck Vexmore's arm, deflecting the blow just enough. Zathera spun, saw the betrayal, and her roar shook the arena. Her claws found Vexmore's throat, and she didn't hesitate. The general fell, blood pooling beneath him. But the human strike team was converging, and Zathera was exhausted from the duel. Cade reached the arena floor as the first operative raised their weapon. He stepped between the gun and the queen. The blade took him in the side, meant for her heart, but finding his ribs instead. Pain bloomed, white-hot and consuming. He felt Zathera catch him as his legs gave out, felt her arms cradle him against her chest. Her roar was primal, terrifying, grief and fury combined. She held Cade with one arm while the other hand swept out, claws catching the operative across the chest. Other warriors poured into the arena, and the strike team retreated under overwhelming force. Chen stood his ground, placing himself between the remaining humans and Zathera. Stand down, all of you, stand down! Zathera looked down at Cade, her face above his blood staining her scales. Her expression held something he'd never seen there before. Fear. Why? She demanded, voice breaking. Why would you? Because you were right, Cade managed, each word agony. Caring isn't weakness, it's worth the risk. Her hand pressed against his wound, trying to stem bleeding that wouldn't stop. Around them, the arena had gone silent, thousands of Skarnathi watching their queen cradle a dying human. Anyone who touches him dies by my hand, Zathera announced, her voice carrying despite its tremor. Anyone. Political consequences be damned. She lifted him carefully, cradling his body against hers, and walked from the arena. Not to the medical wing, to her personal chambers, the most private protected space in the entire palace. Thera appeared at her side. My queen, the council demands. The council can wait. Zathera's voice was steel. Get the best physicians now. As consciousness faded, Cade felt her hand on his face, heard her voice, rough and desperate. Don't you dare die, not after making me feel this, not after showing me what we could be. The last thing he saw was her face, fierce and beautiful and afraid, before darkness claimed him. Cade woke to pain and the smell of antiseptic. His side burned where the blade had entered. each breath a reminder of how close he'd come to dying. Zathera sat beside his bed, her massive form folded into a chair too small for her, head resting on her arms near his hand. She was asleep, exhausted, her scales dulled from stress. He moved his fingers, touching one of her claws. She woke instantly, those blue-green eyes snapping to his face. "You're awake," her voice was rough. 3 days, you've been unconscious for 3 days. "Did I miss anything important?" Her laugh was shaky. "Your species demands your return for trial. Mine demands I execute you for the chaos your presence has caused. The council meets hourly to debate my fitness to rule." She leaned closer, her hand covering his carefully. "I told them all to wait." "Zathera, no, listen." Her jaw set with familiar stubbornness. "I've spent 3 days watching you breathe, terrified each breath would be your last. Watching physicians work to save someone I should consider expendable. And I realized something." Her thumb traced his knuckles. "I don't care about the political cost. I don't care if it makes me appear weak. I will go to war with both our species before I surrender you." Cade squeezed her hand, or tried to. "That's romantic, but terrible strategy." "Then help me find better strategy, because I'm done pretending this doesn't exist." She gestured between them. "Done pretending you're just an advisor or a curiosity. Done lying to myself about what you've become to me." Before Cade could respond, the door opened. Captain Chen entered, looking cleaner than their last meeting, wearing clothes instead of prison rags. Behind him came Liaison Thera and a human woman in diplomatic attire. "The negotiations are starting," Chen said, "whether you're ready or not." The conference room was tense. Scarnathi council members on one side, human diplomats on the other, with Zathera at the head of the table. Kata sat beside her, against all protocol, his presence a statement she refused to compromise on. Commander Voss appeared on the human side via holographic projection, her expression cold. "You're holding our soldier," she began. "Your soldier chose to stay," Zathera replied. "After saving my life and preventing a massacre your team would have triggered." "He's been compromised, possibly coerced." "I'm sitting right here," Cade interjected. "And I'm capable of speaking for myself. I acted to prevent unnecessary death on both sides. The strike team's assassination would have failed and cost thousands of human prisoners their lives." "So you betrayed your species." "I chose a third option, one where both species survive to actually talk instead of kill." Cade leaned forward despite the pain. "Commander, you trained me. You know I don't make decisions based on emotion alone. This makes tactical sense." "Tactical sense?" Voss's projection flickered. "You're sitting beside the leader of the species responsible for burning colonies, enslaving populations. And we're responsible for orbital bombardments that killed millions of their civilians," Cade interrupted. "Both sides have atrocities to answer for. Both sides have reasons to hate, but hatred is all we'll have if this continues." Zathera placed her hand on the table, claws extended slightly. "My advisor speaks truth. This war has cost both our peoples dearly. General Vexmore represented those who would see it continue indefinitely, who believed compromise was weakness." She looked at Cade. "I believed that too, until a human refused to break when every instinct said he should, until he showed me that adaptation is strength, that changing isn't surrender." A Scarnathi council member, older, with graying skin and elaborate horns, spoke up. "You risk everything for this human. The court questions your judgment." "Then let them question." Zathera's voice carried absolute authority. "I defeated Vexmore. The throne is mine by right of combat, and I say we explore peace." "At what cost?" another council member demanded. "We free their prisoners? Accept human terms?" "We negotiate terms that both sides can accept," Zathera said. "Starting with prisoner exchange. Human captives for Scarnathi held in your territories." The human diplomat, a woman named Ambassador Reese, leaned forward. "And what guarantee do we have this isn't subterfuge, that you won't use peace talks to reposition for another offensive?" "You have my word," Zathera said, "and the word of a Scarnathi queen is binding unto death. Words are cheap. Then take me as guarantee." Cade's voice cut through the growing argument. Everyone turned to look at him. "I remain here as permanent liaison, neither prisoner nor free citizen, but but representative of human interests at the Scarnathi court. If Shathera violates the terms, you lose nothing. If she honors them, you gain a diplomatic presence. Chen stood abruptly. Cade, you can't. I can, and I will. Cade met his friend's eyes. You know this is the best option. Someone has to bridge the gap, someone both sides trust, even grudgingly. Someone expendable if things go wrong, Chen said bitterly, but his expression acknowledged the logic. Ambassador Reese studied Cade for a long moment. This is highly irregular. So is everything about this situation, Cade replied, but irregular is better than extinction. The negotiations continued for hours. Terms were debated, compromises reached, frameworks established. Prisoner exchanges would begin immediately. Trade discussions would follow. Military forces would withdraw from contested borders. And Cade Brennan would remain as liaison to Queen Zathera's court, with diplomatic immunity, but no formal rank in either military. When the delegates finally departed, Cade found himself alone with Zathera in her private chambers. She stood at the window overlooking the city, her tail moving restlessly behind her. You volunteered to stay, she said without turning. You could have left, returned to your people. And leave you to navigate this alone? After everything? Cade moved to stand beside her, his head barely reaching her shoulder. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't revert to solving problems by crushing them. She laughed, the sound warm. You realize what you've committed to. Years, possibly decades, of serving as buffer between two species that hate each other. Constant danger, political attacks, neither side fully trusting you. I've faced worse. When? 5 minutes in an arena against a 20-foot queen who wanted me dead. Zathera turned to face him, and her expression was soft in a way he'd never seen before. I didn't want you dead, not after the first minute. When did you know? That I cared? She reached out, her claw tracing his jawline without touching. When you went inside my guard instead of away. When you showed me you understood that proximity could be strength instead of vulnerability. Her hand moved to rest on his shoulder, the weight substantial but controlled. When did you know? When you caught me after the fight and I saw genuine surprise in your eyes. When I realized you'd never been challenged before, never had anyone refuse to simply break. Cade placed his hand over hers. When you visited my quarters that first night and admitted you didn't understand what I'd done to you. I still don't fully understand it. Good, neither do I. We'll figure it out together. Zathera pulled him closer, carefully, mindful of his healing wounds. Her other arm wrapped around him, and he felt the strength in her, the power she could unleash but chose to restrain. Her forehead rested against the top of his head, and they stood like that in the fading light. They'll call this weakness, she murmured. Both are peoples. They'll say, I'm corrupted, you're compromised. Let them. They said the same thing when you elevated prey species to advisor, when you adopted human tactics, when you declared peace talks. Cade looked up at her. They've been wrong about everything else. Her smile was fierce and beautiful. Stay with me. Not as advisor or liaison or political necessity. Stay because you want to. I want to. Even knowing it will be difficult, that we'll face opposition constantly. Especially knowing that. Cade's hand moved to her face, touching scales that had once seemed monstrous but now felt like home. We've survived impossible odds before. Arena combat, assassination attempts, ritual challenges. This is just another fight. But one worth fighting. The only one worth fighting. Zathera kissed him then, her lips careful against his despite the fangs, her touch gentle despite the claws. It was awkward and perfect and entirely them, human and Scarnathi, prey and predator, two beings who should have been enemies discovering they could be something else entirely. When they finally pulled apart, the city lights had come on below, illuminating both Scarnathi citizens and the newly arrived human diplomatic corps moving through the streets, two species beginning to coexist. Look at them, Zathera said, her arm around Cade's shoulders. What we started. What we'll finish, Cade leaned into her warmth. Together. Outside, the night deepened, and somewhere in the distance, Chen stood watching the palace, shaking his head but smiling. Thera arranged quarters for human delegates. her bright red skin vivid as she explained Scarnathi customs they'd need to understand. Ambassador Reese drafted reports that would reshape interstellar politics. And in the palace chambers, a queen who'd never lost a battle held close the human who'd taught her that some victories required surrender, that strength could be found in vulnerability, that love was the bravest fight of all. They'd face challenges ahead, opposition, prejudice, those who wanted war to continue, but they'd face them together, human ingenuity and Scarnathi strength combined into something neither species had seen before. Something that looked remarkably like hope.